In American crime history, some cases never settle because the facts refuse to form a single shape. On December 26, 1996, Boulder, Colorado woke under a thin winter light. Christmas decorations still glowed behind glass. Streets were calm, muffled by cold air and leftover holiday quiet. The Ramsey home on 15th Street sat in that calm lodge, orderly, the kind of place where danger was supposed to stay outside. The family had returned late from a Christmas gathering. JonBenét Ramsey, 6 years old, was said to have fallen asleep in the car and been carried upstairs to bed. Nothing about the night suggested the morning would become a national obsession. Just before 6 a.m., Patsy Ramsey came down the stairs and saw pages laid across a step. Not a single sheet, several. Ransom noche. It claimed JonBenét had been taken by a small foreign faction. It demanded $118,000 for her safe return. It warned the family not to call police. Patsy called 911 anyway. Within minutes, officers arrived. Friends were summoned for support. The house filled with movement doors opening, footsteps, voices kept low but urgent. The investigation began as a kidnapping, and the home was treated like a place to wait for instructions rather than a scene to freeze in time. Even then, the note felt wrong. It was long 3 pages written with a steadiness that didn't match a hurried crime. It used paper from inside the house. The pen came from inside the house, and the amount demanded, $118,000, was not a rounded figure. It was close to John Ramsey's recent business bonus. Hours passed. The note suggested a time frame for contact. No call came. No proof of life. Outside, nothing obvious appeared. No broken doors. No shattered window that clearly belonged to that night. No neighbors reporting a scream. No clear tracks leading away through the snow. As the morning hardened into afternoon, a detective asked John Ramsey to search the house top to bottom for anything unusual. He went downstairs. The basement was dim, divided into storage spaces and small rooms that were easy to ignore. Behind one interior door, he found his daughter. JonBenét had never left the house. The kidnapping story collapsed at the exact moment her body was carried upstairs. From that point on, the case was no longer about who took her. It was about what happened inside a home that appeared, from the outside, untouched. If the note was meant to buy time, it had worked. If it was meant to point away from the truth, it had done that too. And the central question formed almost immediately, sharp and impossible to soften. If she was never taken, what really happened inside that house? After JonBenét was found, the ransom note stopped being a kidnapping demand and became an object that needed an author. 3 pages is not a mistake you make quickly. The phrasing carried confidence, not panic. It described the Ramseys as if the writer expected to be taken seriously, and it mixed threats with oddly formal instructions. Some lines sounded borrowed, almost cinematic, as though the note had been rehearsed in the writer's mind before it ever reached the staircase. Investigators focused on the basics first. The paper came from Patsy's notepad. The pen used was consistent with one found inside the home. Reports of a discarded draft suggested the note may have been started, reconsidered, and written again. That possibility editing inside the house implied time. Time while the family slept. Time while a child was in danger. Time that an intruder would be risking with every second. Then there was the amount, $118,000, not $100,000, not $1 million. A precise number, close to John Ramsey's recent bonus. Coincidence was possible, but coincidence does not explain why a stranger would land on a figure that matched a private detail. That single number tightened the focus of the case, because it suggested knowledge either of the family, of the home, or of the man who signed the paychecks. Handwriting analysis did not resolve it. Examiners compared the note to Patsy Ramsey's writing and disagreed. Some saw similarities in letter forms and rhythm. Others said they could not declare a match. The result was the worst kind of conclusion for a case already unstable, uncertainty that could be interpreted either way. While the note was debated, the house itself offered little clarity. There was no clear forced entry that shouted intrusion. A basement window had been broken previously, and that fact became a doorway for competing narratives. Could someone have entered through it? Possibly, but possible is not the same as proven, and the case would spend years trapped between those two words. Meanwhile, early decisions shaped everything. Because the morning began as a kidnapping, the home was not locked down immediately as a homicide scene. Friends had moved through rooms. Surfaces had been touched. Air had been filled with people. In a case where tiny fibers and brief contacts might matter, the scene had been changed before the investigation understood what it truly was. As media coverage surged, the public began building its own version of the story. JonBenét's pageant images circulated everywhere, and those photographs became a lens through which strangers judged a family they had never met. But inside the evidence, the note remained stubborn. It did not explain the crime. It complicated it. It inserted a narrative before investigators could build their own. And with every reading, the same pressure returned. If the note was written to mislead, then the case was staged from the start. If it was written by an outsider, then that outsider moved through the house with an almost impossible calm. Either way, the note was not just paper. It was a deliberate act, and the person who wrote it expected to control the direction of the story. The basement scene did not offer drama. It offered details quiet, physical details that refused to fit neatly. Around the ransom story, JonBenét had been covered with a white blanket. Duct tape had been placed over her mouth. A cord had been tied around her neck. The bindings on her wrists appeared loose, more like staging than restraint. And the injuries, both a severe head injury and strangulation, forced investigators into a question that would haunt the case. What happened first, and why? The answers were not simple. Autopsy findings and interpretations became contested terrain. The timeline between. Injuries mattered because it spoke to intent and sequence. A sudden blow suggests one kind of moment. A deliberate strangulation suggests another. Together, they created a portrait of escalation rather than a single act, and escalation inside a home raises its own set of possibilities. Forensic work produced fragments. Investigators also considered the mundane: light switches, door latches, stair creaks, the way air moves in an unfinished level. They walked the routes again and again, trying to make the house speak, but houses do not testify. They only hold what happened, and this one held it too well. Absorbing the night into drywall and carpet without leaving a single obvious point of collapse, fibers were examined. The cord and tape were tested. A DNA profile from an unknown male was reported on JonBenét's clothing, and that detail complicated everything again. To some, it was the intruder in miniature proof that someone from outside had been there. To others, it was a reminder that DNA can arrive through transfer, contamination, or innocent contact, especially in a scene that was not protected in the first hours. The house itself became a character in the case. It was large, layered, full of corners and doors. It allowed movement without being seen. It allowed sound to die before it reached bedrooms. It allowed small actions to disappear into space. Investigators tried to determine entry points, but the structure offered no clean answer. A previous broken window invited speculation. Doors and locks offered uncertainty. And the neighborhood offered silence. No witness, no confirmed noise, no obvious disturbance. As the investigation expanded, so did the fractures around it. Boulder police were criticized for early handling, for communication, for the pressure of a national spotlight. Disagreements between law enforcement and prosecutors became part of the story. The case was not only about what happened in the basement, it became about whether the system could ever reconstruct that night accurately after the first hours were lost. Through it all, the basement remained the center. A small room, a closed door, a child who had not been taken away but left inside. That single fact kept breaking the narrative apart. It forced every theory to explain not only how she died, but why the crime stayed within the house. And that containment violence that did not spill into the street, that did not wake neighbors, that did not leave a clear path outward may be the most unsettling element of all. Whatever happened, it happened in quiet. And quiet is what the case has never been able to escape. In the years that followed, the case did not move forward in a straight line. It widened. It fractured. It became a public argument carried by headlines, documentaries, and endless debate over the same few pieces of evidence. The Ramseys left Boulder, and the house changed hands, but the story stayed fixed in a single winter morning. In 1998, a grand jury was convened to review evidence and testimony. The proceedings were secret, and when the grand jury voted in 1999 to indict John and Patsy Ramsey on charges related to child abuse, resulting in death and being accessories, the district attorney chose not to sign the indictment, saying the evidence was not strong enough to win at trial. Years later, when the indictment details became public, they raised new questions without providing a name for the killer. DNA continued to loom over the case. In 2008, the district attorney publicly stated that the Ramseys were no longer considered suspects, citing DNA evidence. But the DNA did not end the story. It did not deliver an arrest, a confession, or a courtroom conclusion. Instead, it became another line that people read in opposite ways, either as a doorway to an intruder, or as a fragment that could not carry the weight placed on it. Time removed some voices entirely. Patsy Ramsey died in 2006. John Ramsey continued to speak about the case, urging renewed testing and continued investigation. Meanwhile, the culture around true crime grew, and the JonBenét case remained one of its most persistent gravitational centers because it contains the ingredients that never stop pulling attention back: a child, a wealthy home, a note that feels authored, and a crime that refuses to resolve. To narratives still dominate. One says an intruder entered, staged, and escaped, leaving behind almost nothing except a story written on the stairs. The other says the event began inside the house, and the note was created to redirect the truth. Both narratives have gaps. Both demand assumptions. Both struggle with the same immovable fact: the ransom note and the body exist in the same home, on the same morning, with no clean bridge between them. That is why the case remains unsettled. Not because nothing is known, but because what is known points in more than one direction at once. What makes the case endure is not only the mystery, but the sense that the earliest hours decided the outcome. A scene that begins crowded, unsealed, and emotionally chaotic becomes a scene that can never be fully replayed. Later tests, later experts, later documentaries all inherit that damage. And when the beginning is compromised, the case becomes a permanent argument instead of a conclusion for everyone who wants certainty. So the final question is not simply who did it. It is how such a thing could happen inside a house that looked safe from the outside on a night that should have been ordinary. If an intruder did it, how did they move with such control and leave so little trace? And if no intruder did, how did the truth become buried under 3 pages of ink before the sun had fully risen? What really happened inside that house?